The presidential race is heating up as RFK Jr. announces his running mate.
I'm so proud to introduce to you the next Vice President of the United States, Nicole Shanahan.
Nicole Shanahan is an Oakland, California native and powerhouse in Silicon Valley who made her mark as a tech attorney and entrepreneur. Previously married to Google co-founder Sergey Brin, the two divorced in 2022. Shanahan has turned her attention to philanthropy, helping fund autism research, and is president of BioEcho Foundation, which focuses on reproductive longevity and criminal justice reform. With only 10% of the vote so far, was this the right pick for the presidential hopeful? It's time to go on the record with Scott Tranter, Director of Data Science from Decision Desk HQ. Scott, as always, thanks so much for being with us. Nicole Shanahan wasn't a household name before this announcement. What do we know about RFK's decision to tap her as his running mate?
Well, she wasn't a household name, so everyone who's following RFK now is Googling her, which is what his campaign's based on. It's based on buzz. That's why he did that buzzy Super Bowl ad that we talked about, and it sounds like she funded it. It's going to create some buzz. I don't know anything about her, just like everyone else. I'm Googling like everyone else. I'm looking for the reports. It'll be interesting. You know, she could certainly create some excitement. You know, obviously the Democratic and Republicans are deriding her as inexperienced and things like that. But look, a third-party candidate like RFK is not his argument isn't bringing experience to the table. His argument's bringing new blood, and she's certainly that.
So Kennedy and Shanahan are aligned on issues such as vaccine skepticism. Is there any data showing this being a no-win opinion?
You know, there's quite a bit on vaccine data over the last 2 or 3 years, because if you remember, this started with Chris Christie, you know, way back 5, 6, 7 years ago, in his GOP primary when he was governor, where he came out interestingly against this. And then it's always been a thing in Republican primaries, GOP primaries, things like that, as a fringe movement. So anywhere from 5 to 10% of GOP primary voters tend to have some skepticism around vaccines. Obviously, after COVID, there was quite a bit of backlash and discussion around that. And we see GOP voters anywhere from 5 to 10% have some issues around vaccines, or at least some skepticism around it. And so, you know, RFK's been a leading voice on that for for at least 10 or 15 years now. So he's got a name brand around that. Look, it's not a mainstream view. You know, Pew did a great study last year where they showed 80% of Americans either somewhat or wholly trusted their primary care physicians on vaccines for themselves and their children, which is, you know, bipartisan support for vaccines. But there is a small subset out there that support it, and they're fervent about it. And it looks like RFK is certainly going to tap into that.
Nicole Shanahan seems like an interesting pick for RFK Jr. for sure, but it's clearly calculated. She's a political novice. Could this benefit the campaign by bringing in an outsider such as her?
Yeah, look, last time we had something like this, John McCain picked Sarah Palin, right? A relative outsider. Now, she was governor of Alaska, so she had some political experience, but he was looking for a game change, right? That was his term. This is what RFK is looking for. She's a new face. She's gonna get a lot of interviews. She's gonna get an opportunity to present herself on the campaign trail. Maybe she wows and impresses. Maybe she doesn't. This is a good pick just because we're all asking questions. We want to hear her and hear what she has to say. She also brings a lot of funding to the table, which is something RFK is gonna need. You know, today it looks like a good pick. Let's see what it looks like a week or two down the road when she's on the trail.
Yeah, and on that question about the funding that she could bring to, you know, the campaign, it's important to note she previously donated $4 million to the super PAC that ran the pro-Kennedy Super Bowl ad. Do you think this decision was primarily motivated by her money?
I don't know if it was primarily motivated, but we'd be foolish to think it wasn't part of the calculation, right? Like, all campaigns at the end of the day, they need money and they need money to operate. So you have to believe that, you know, at some point there was a discussion about would she be willing to put funds in, or at least hit up some of her donor friends to help do this. I mean, look, let's just be honest. He's certainly not going to come out and say it, but it had to have been at least a factor in his decision making.
So what are the next steps they need to take for a chance to, you know, make some sort of an impact on the presidential race?
Well, I found it interesting. You know, I was watching his announcement speech the other day, and he actually came out and he said the quiet part out loud. He's like, my campaign's a spoiler. Right. Yeah. Now, he was saying in the context of he thinks he's going to spoil and win the whole thing. I think that's highly improbable. But what his campaign needs to do is they need to get on ballots in places like Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, Nevada, Georgia, and really all 50 states if they're going to win enough electoral votes. But that's what we're looking for. He is his aligned super PAC, which he can't coordinate with, has said that they have enough signatures in places like Georgia and Arizona that shows some organizational heft. They're obviously raising money. He talks about it as if he knows what he needs to do. So, that's part of the battle. We'll see, as we get Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, their filing deadlines and their signature deadlines over the next few months. If his campaign does that, they're positioning themselves to at least have a significant role in who gets to be president this later this year, even if it's not themselves.
So talking to Republicans and Democrats supporting Trump and Biden, none of them seem to be thrilled about the idea of an RFK candidacy because of the fact that he could be a spoiler. But we don't know really who he's going to impact, the GOP or the Democratic side. So what's Decision Desk's three-way tracker showing between Biden, Trump, and RFK Jr.?
So it's right before I was on here, we were playing around with that. Nationally, we've got RFK at just right around 9%, which is about a point lower than his high watermark reached a week ago. We're working on some of these averages in battleground states like Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin. So look for those to be released in the coming week or two as we get more polling data on it. I will say, at least nationally, he takes away from both Democrats and Republicans. It's not significant. It's 1 or 2 points nationally, and it's certainly not gonna flip the race for him. But if he actually takes 1 or 2 points away from both the Republican and Democrat, both Biden and Trump, in a state like Wisconsin or a state like Pennsylvania or Georgia or Michigan, he will certainly play a deciding factor. And at least right now, and there's a long way to go in the campaign, he takes voters from both sides.
Making everyone on all sides very nervous, that's for sure. So switching gears to President Biden, is Decision Desk following any good news for him regarding his approval rating?
It's interesting on that, too. I was looking at it. He is back down right before the State of the Union. He was at 39% approval rating, which is one of his lowest marks over the last year. He did the State of the Union. His numbers came out of the State of the Union relatively flat. They actually hit a new 6-month high watermark a week ago today. It was at low 44. Today, he's back down to 40%. And so what I would like to say is, look, he had a little bit of bump after the State of the Union running around, and now it's come back down to where he's been primarily over the last year, somewhere between 39 and 42. What I will say for those of us who watch this is how it goes. He's going to go up and down, and I look where his range is. His range has been 39 to 44 the last 6 months. We need to see his range move up to 44 to 48. That's what his campaign would like him to see as he, gets into the campaign season. But right now, his range 39 to 44. His campaign's gearing up. He's about to spend money. He's certainly going out there. He had a strong speech after the bridge collapse in Maryland the other day. He's going to have to get out there and see if he can move his range up. But as of today, it's roughly where it was right before the State of the Union.
So moving on to individual states, President Biden won Georgia by only 11,779 votes in 2020, but recent polling shows Trump is expanding his lead in the state. Could Georgia ultimately decide the election this year?
It could. Actually, Georgia is one of those states where obviously Trump, famously tried very hard to find a few 11,000 extra votes. His campaign's spending a lot of money down there. I don't necessarily think it's going to be the deciding state as long as Trump wins it. If he doesn't win it and Biden actually pulls it off there, that could be the tipping point state. But I'm looking at states like Michigan, Arizona to be tipping point states. Georgia's certainly a battleground, but the polling looks really good for Donald Trump there. And, before 2020, that was a solid Republican state. And so we expect that one to go back in the column. Although the Biden campaign says they're going to compete there, they also say they're going to compete in North Carolina, which was a solid Trump state in 2020 and 2016. It hasn't been won by a Democrat since 2008. So certainly there's going to be some battles back and forth.
Yeah, North Carolina really is emerging as one of the most talked about swing states this cycle. But I want to move further out west. It seems like Biden might be in hot water when it comes to Arizona and Nevada this election after winning both states in 2020. What are those states looking like right now? Would Trump win in those states if the election was held today?
Short answer, yes. If we look at the polling averages in Nevada and Arizona, he is, anywhere from 1 to 3 points up. That's not 100%. If I had $1,000 to bet, I wouldn't bet all $1,000 on Donald Trump, but I'd certainly be betting on him to win. Let's talk about Nevada for a second. Nevada, there is a contentious Senate race. We have incumbent Democratic Senator Jackie Rosen there. She's expected to win, but we have been seeing in the polling Donald Trump has been doing better with Hispanic, especially blue-collar Hispanic workers, which Nevada has a lot of. We could see a scenario where the Democrats, against all odds, hold on to a Senate seat in Ohio or maybe a Senate seat in Montana, but lose their Senate seat in Nevada, and Donald Trump wins a state like that. And wins the presidency as well as, clinches the Senate based off that. So Nevada is one of my dark horse states. I know we're going to talk about Georgia, Michigan, Pennsylvania a lot, but states like Nevada and Arizona, especially given how Trump is performing among the Hispanic voters, is certainly one to watch.
Scott, before I let you go, I want to get your take on this week's special election in Alabama. It was a bright spot for Democrats, particularly on the issue of reproductive rights. Do you think the special election is a warning sign for Republicans across the country going into the general election this fall?
Short answer is yes. I mean, look, it was a district that was R+1. So on paper, if everything goes how it's supposed to, the Republican should have won. Now, the Democrat who actually won last night obviously overperformed her numbers there, but she very explicitly campaigned on reproductive rights, right? So she put it out there in deep red Alabama and said, this is why you need to vote for me. So it was a very good, for us political scientists, a test case to see how that messaging works in an environment that's not necessarily friendly to it. I think that playbook is going to be looked at in places like Ohio and Michigan and some of these other places where we might see some reproductive rights bills on the table. And again, this is not a one-off data point. We saw this in Ohio last year on some of the ballot issues. We're seeing in some other stuff. So this is something both Democrats and Republicans could watch because this is a repeatable playbook.
Scott Tranter, as always, thank you for helping us break it down this week.
Thanks for having me.